Welcome everyone. My name is Remy. I'm happy to be joined by Yorick. Hello, Yorick. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Can't
Uh,
complain.
yeah. Welcome to our second episode for the Staking Talking Nerd. Uh,
Uh, yeah, nerd talk that way. One of
sorry. Yeah,
those.
the Staking Nerd Talk. Yeah. I'm already confused about what we're doing here today, but
This
as
is this is my normal way of going through the day, actually.
I'm happy that we managed to find enough topic for the second episode. And we have a few different topics to talk about today. The first one I wanted to talk about was the economic of compounding validators, which
Hmm.
is based on a nice post by Jim McDonald from Attestant. He decided to check out the rewards over time for if you are to go compounding or not, and if you are to manage the rewards. Um, but let's go back to what a compounding validator is. So the idea for compounding is that the rewards that you get just keep on being on your validator balance without having to be withdrawal every once in a while. So the ETH stays on balance, and eventually it gets to be used as part of the formula to compute the rewards that you get and the chances that you get for being part of a sync committee or being selected for block proposal. You also get more reward as you get more effective balance, but the effective balance is only computed as you get to a higher integer value on your validator's balance. With the case of the hysteresis zone, where you need to be at least 0.25 ETH above that integer value for the effective balance to count, right? So compounding rewards, are they worth it? Are they interesting? I guess it depends on how much ETH you want to stake. If you have a lot more than 32 ETH, it makes a lot of sense to choose a compounding validator.
Hmm.
And it also depends on like how you want to use that ETH, right? So people were used to the regular withdrawals. So if you want to use this ETH as part of some kind of DeFi protocol, maybe you want to send it away and invest it in something else. But if you are a true staker believer, if you believe in the staking protocol on Ethereum, it makes a lot of sense to simply use a compounding validator, and the consensus rewards that you get will just end up on your balance, and eventually you'll get more rewards because of it. What's your take on this, your
Um, Very simply, uh, do it if the 0.1% additional APY, or of course, right, that's just for compounding, but also being able to earn the APY on more ETH is compelling to you. So if you have 32, but you have another 10, and you're like, yeah, I don't care that the APY is a little higher. I just want to actually be able to earn on those 10. Um, by all means, go for it, right? What you're giving up is liquidity. So if you're the kind of guy who's like, yeah, I actually have a number of validators running, and every 9 days that sweeps some ETH into my account, which I then, sell on a whatever monthly basis and use to defray my costs, or if you're really doing well, living completely off, right? Or at least help with the bills in some way. If that's what you're doing, then just keep doing that. Because you're not interested in compounding anyway. You're looking at liquidity. So, that's the trade-off. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here, or rather, there are both right answers. Just depends on what's right for somebody's financial situation.
In Jim's post, he did some comparison with different kind of managed or unmanaged or like compounding or not compounding validator, and over a long period of time, it makes a lot of sense to use a compounding validator, right?
Yeah, again, if you want that ability to earn on the additional ETH. And my answer doesn't change, right? It makes sense if what you're after is to say, I want to earn as much as possible from the ETH, and I want to just have it sit there as much as possible, have it sit there. Then surely you want, say you start with a 32 ETH validator, you want that to be 33, 34, 35, and so on and so on and so on, and earn on that. But if your theory in life is, no, I have all the ETH I want, that's enough exposure, thank you. I just want the liquidity every 9 days, and then sell it for you for whatever your local fiat is, right? And pay bills, then don't do anything, don't compound.
Good point. And I think you also have to take into account that even if you're using a compounding validator, you will still get execution rewards. So no matter what,
Yes,
you will get rewards that will be liquid and that will be accessible in one of
this
your
is very
wallets.
true. Yes, and that's a good point. And Jim's numbers assume that these will also be put back into the validator
In some kind of managed way, right? So
in a managed manual way. Yeah, that every so often you take these rewards and put them back on.
I believe in his post he mentioned that if you want to do this properly, you might want to wait until you have like 1 ETH or like 1.25 ETH until you top up
Yeah,
your validator.
exactly. Or shall we say enough to get to that threshold,
Yeah.
right? So say your validator by itself is already at 0.75, then once you have 0.5 accumulated through your EL rewards or a little more, in it goes and you get to that next threshold.
So I think one of the take of that article was that if you want to really go all in on ETH and you want to do it on a long time, over a 10-year period, you might get up to 5 or up to, was it 7% more rewards overall if you were to use a compounding validator compared to just a regular
I
validator.
did not see that. No, I saw, so
Uh,
in percentage points, what I saw from Jim was 0.1% higher APY max
I mean,
overall.
he did a table at the end of the post if you want to go check again, and like over 10 years, since it's
Right.
compounding, you get slightly more rewards.
Okay, I can check again. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's only if you want to go all in, and probably if your strategy is to stay in ETH, which is hard
Right.
to picture for any reasonable person, like staying all in for this long. But maybe that's something some people might be interested in.
Right, for sure. This can also be used for some corner cases. So say you have a number of validators and for whatever reason, set these up with different withdrawal addresses and you're no longer happy with that setup and you want it all on one withdrawal address. Typically, you'd have to exit and redeposit. This gives you a chance to not do that. Take any validator you own where you control the withdrawal address, which is the address you want from now on. Maybe you got a new hardware wallet or whatever, right? And then you can consolidate all the others in there and they will use, because the consolidation is under the hood and exit and deposit, just without going through your withdrawal wallet first. All of the ETH is now on the target validator.
And that can have some tax implication as well. So if you're
Yes, potentially, because you're not actually receiving the ETH.
yeah.
It stays in there, So you withdraw it, it might be classed, and ask your tax accountant because this gets complex, but it might be classified as you now have it, and now you have to pay whatever difference in value it had from when you originally bought it. Whereas if it stays staked, then you only pay once you take it out of stake again. But that depends extremely highly on where you live and how your taxes work. So talk to your accountant about that.
And this is true for consolidation, but it's also true for compounding validator, right? So as you get regular withdrawals, maybe there's tax implications for you, but if the reward stays on the validator's balance, maybe it's preferable for you in terms of taxes.
Yeah, this really depends. And it might make actually your tax accounting more difficult in some jurisdictions. So some jurisdictions, they say, well, once it's in your validator balance, you could grab it at any time.
Yeah.
So your rewards are taxable the moment you receive them. They don't really mean that. They don't mean every 6.4 minutes. Okay. I think if you do something reasonable, again, I'm not an accountant, talk to your tax accountant, yada,
Exactly.
yada. But typically, if you do something reasonable, like we're recording it once a week, your tax authorities are typically happy with that, right? But again, it depends. Some jurisdictions, that's exactly how it works. You have to tax it as you receive it. Other jurisdictions say, hey, we only care once you go back into whatever the local currency is. Once you sell it, then we want our taxes. It all depends.
Taxes are already a nightmare. I didn't want this to be a taxing nerd talk. But
right. Yeah, let's not talk too much about
that. All right. I think that's pretty much all I had with this topic. Maybe we could talk about another one. We had this.
Do you want to also maybe link people to your guide as to how to actually do these consolidations?
Well, we will put a few links at the bottom of the video in the descriptions if you guys want to learn more about this, including the link to Jim's article.
Perfect.
For sure. Yeah. We had a few different topics suggested by different users. One of them was the path to being a professional operator. You are a professional operator, Yorick. Tell us more about this.
Oh my God. I'm wondering whether I actually want to, because that's a tall lift, right? And we're not gonna go into how do I build a company on staking on the top. But maybe to dip your toe in, if you're a solo operator now, how could I be an operator for various staking protocols? That's, I would say, semi-pro. That's definitely where it starts, right? In a nutshell, you take a look at the protocols you want to be working with or for. We had one on recently, Aztec, right? There's a couple others. I think Rockerpool, of course, exists.
The Lido
has a community.
CSM. Yeah.
The Lido CSM. I think NodeSet does something with Stakewise.
Yep.
Right. And basically, you look at their SSV is another one where you can be a node operator. You look from a technical perspective, you look at their description of how to spin up a node, and that's typically standalone. And then you think about, well, if I just run their component, which is often just a validator client or something of that nature, can I point it to my existing consensus layer client and execution layer client that I'm already running for, for my solo? And the answer is, of course, you can. There's a couple of things you need to keep in mind. One is that one consensus layer client only ever has one set of MEV relays. So you'll want to find that set, that kind of Venn diagram where all of the people you're working with can agree on whatever it is you are actually running. You can't be, if they all have different sets, you need to find that middle of the Venn diagram where.
And that could be another mess.
That could be another mess, exactly. And other than that, from a technical perspective, how do I actually point them to my CLN? Well, we're not going to get into that on this talk. That gets really far too deep. But in a nutshell, you could do it on localhost. You can do it over LAN. If you're in Docker, you can do it with bridge networks, so that they all just talk inside a network that's not even exposed to the host. There's a number of ways of doing that. I highly recommend to try this on Hoodie testnet first, right? Don't
For
YOLO
sure.
into this
Yeah.
on mainnet if you don't understand how it works. You're going to learn more about networking than you probably currently know. If you're already an expert, then more power to you. But for a lot of operators, they just set it up, they follow a guide, they use a tool, whatever. They don't really understand how the networking works under the hood. You'll have to learn at least enough to know, okay, where are these API ports on the consensus and execution layer? How do I make them accessible? How do I secure them if I need to do that with a firewall? And how do I have then some other service of mine connect to them and consume that API?
In some
And
case, I
that's
believe,
it in a
yeah.
nutshell.
In some case, I believe just being a pro operator is running a key for someone else. And in that case, all you have to do is import the key and run it yourself, right?
When you say run a key for someone else, you mean like which you
For
mean for
for
like a solo
another,
key?
yeah, just for another entity, or like for someone else,
Sure.
like if you have a friend
Yeah.
who doesn't have a node
If you
and
have a friend and you want to run their key, sure. Yeah, in that case it's very simple. If you're not engaging with any of this LST stuff, right? You would just import the key, set a separate fee recipient for that, of
yep,
course, right? Unless your
which
friend
needs
is extremely
some
generous.
tweaking for some of the clients, yeah.
It needs some tweaking for some of the clients. Yeah, in the systemd world, like the Soma ASAT, etc. I think for the most part, you have to manually edit a JSON file. You might know that better, whether tools like your ETH-Wizard expose that,
Yeah, I believe there's
or ramp that, or you need to do it
validator
manually.
client, you just do a manual file edit, yeah.
Yeah, you need to create a JSON file manually. With the Docker project that I maintain, it's just ETH key set recipient. There's a wrapper for key manager API that and just talks to the key manager
Yeah.
API of the Albert client and sets it that way, right?
I
Because
believe
honestly, I
ultimately,
didn't want to think about JSON files.
yeah, ultimately being like a pro is being able to provide like a good service to potentially someone else.
Yes,
And part of being able to provide a good service is just being able to run nodes in a way that are always online, and then have good efficiency in terms of like being able to stake accordingly to the protocol.
right. I did a talk on this, by the way, or maybe we can find the link, last year during one of the Lido shindigs. And the thing I said then, I think I still believe now, and that is the main difference between somebody who does this for a living and somebody who does it for themselves is monitoring and alerting. That's really what it is. Things always go wrong. It's perfectly normal. But the point is you want to know. Um, even better is if you know before they go so wrong that you're down,
Which is part of like giving a good quality to your client, right? In the end.
Absolutely. Yeah. So monitoring and alerting is the thing, right? So you'll learn how to use Grafana, how to use its alerting mechanisms, which are built into Grafana. It can alert you through a whole bunch of things. Telegram, Discord, Slack, email, SMS, even all kinds of things, right? So that's a whole skill set in and of itself to
It is,
write
yeah.
good alerts so that you're not getting spammed with nonsense. Um, the very low level way to start is to start with beacon chain alerting.
Yep.
It at least will let you know, if you use their stat collector, it'll let you know if you're running low on disk space. That's helpful. And it will let you know if you're actually down. It won't maybe alert you ahead of time if something doesn't look quite right, but it will alert you when things have gone wrong. So that's good. Yeah.
Awesome.
Um,
That's all I had
yeah, and
about
then other
this.
than that, and like when you're looking at things like SSV, you're like, well, how do I attract stake there? Well, the answer typically is you need to become a verified operator. Lido CSM is starting something like this as well. So there you would look at each individual project and see what they require to verify someone. It might be that, your stuff is resilient, stays up, that you're verified as a person. Sometimes they want you as a business, a registered business, before they will verify you.
Do you know if they're doing KYC as well?
Some are, yeah. I think Lido says, I haven't looked into this very deeply. They have a blog post like last week, I think. They're looking at allowing anonymous running still, but also connecting it to social media accounts and activity on their forums, etc.
I see. I guess we're good to go to the next topic, which is the advanced strategies to prevent validators from finalizing a supermajority bugs and improve potentially the resilience of everything. I think the main way to get there is to run minority client. That's that's my take there, and we already have like good clients. All of the consensus and most of the execution clients are pretty good right now. Running a minority one is very easy. Migrating from one client to the other one is like the way to go. That's the KISS, keep it simple strategy there. There's a bunch of different ones. If people want to talk about the advanced one, and I'm sure you have a few ones.
About advanced strategies,
right?
Yeah. So there is a website. Let me just see whether I can find this. Is it supermajority.info?
The one that gives you the stats for all the usage for the client?
It has the, yeah, that's the one that, I'm sorry, I should have been coming better prepared.
I believe there's client diversity.
Yeah, I don't think I want that one. Okay, if you go to supermajority.info and you click on Risk Simulator, that's where the advanced strategies come in, right? So there you can say, which clients am I running and which of those are faulty? And am I using an attestation consensus threshold? So what on earth is an attestation consensus threshold? Imagine for a moment, and we'll get into in a second like how this actually works, but imagine for a moment that you're not running one client, you're running 3, 4, 5, or 6, a whole bunch of them. And you have a consensus threshold. So they all need to agree, or say you're running 5, 4 of 5 need to agree before you say, I am going to sign this. So what is this for? Why? That's really a rather advanced strategy, right? Why would this be desirable? What does it do for a solo staker? And what would need to happen network-wide for this to actually be useful? So what we're protecting against here is the thing that happened on Oleshki. On Oleshki, 3 clients, never mind Geth and Besu, had the same bug, the same consensus impacting bug. So while, say you're running Besu, that's a minority client, wonderful. Unfortunately, together with Geth and Nethermind, that's a supermajority. So at some point, we actually had supermajority clients. One bug in one client could have suffered the chain. So hurrah, that's no longer the case. We should all pat ourselves on the back. So now we have a new fear unlocked. Wonderful. And the new fear is, well, what happens if 2 or 3 clients or 4 clients have the same bug and together they get over this threshold?
What are the odds though? Like, what are the odds that like 2 or 3 clients have the same bugs?
Were minimal. Well, they're certainly not 0, right? So this is the thing with odds and probabilities. The odds are clearly not 0, as we saw in Heleshki. Sure, it's a testnet. It did exactly what it was supposed to do, which is find this kind of stuff before it hits mainnet. The odds are still not 0. If you take a small probability and you have the odd of that happening every day, and it's independent of the previous day, and you go over decades, then at some point it becomes an almost certainty that you hit this damn thing, right? You know that. So That is not in any given day. The odd is still really small on any given day, but over time, eventually, if these are independent odds, you're just gonna, it's almost guaranteed that we're eventually gonna hit that. So we can all pray and cross fingers that it doesn't happen, and that's probably good enough for years at least. But probably good enough is not very confidence inducing. So what do we do about it? So imagine now that, and this is something that's near and dear to my own heart. We're testing this right now, and I want to encourage other large operators to be serious about this. Imagine now that 40% of stake, I'm using 40% only so we have a nice safe buffer above the 1/3 threshold.
Yep.
But roughly 40% of stake are running a circuit breaker setup, this attestation consensus threshold. So what I'm imagining here is they're running all 6 consensus layer clients, all 5 execution layer clients, and they're saying 5 of 6 of these consensus layer clients need to agree for me to sign anything. That means that now any 4 can be faulty in a correlated way, have the same bug, and we're still good. At this point, have we reduced the likelihood of this happening to 0? No, we have not. Obviously, if 5 have the same bug or 6 have the same bug, we're screwed. However, we've truly mitigated it. Like the likelihood, the probability of that happening has become even smaller. And I still have some resilience. Like if I say 5 or 6, if I'm doing maintenance on one of my backend servers, no problem. I'm still testing, right?
And what kind of
So
tool can make this possible?
there are currently only 2 tools that can do this. That's why I'm saying it would be good to test it on testnet, and then maybe see whether other client teams want to get on board. The 2 tools that can do this right now are Vero, so validator client that works with Web3 signer in the back. So if somebody has a Web3 signer setup already, which is incredibly common with Pro operators, they could slot in Vero and set up this consensus threshold, right, as their validator client. And Vero is designed to work against a multi-client backend. It was created exactly for this problem. The other one is Vouch with Dirk. But if you're not already running Vouch Dirk, this is a large lift. I wouldn't recommend, as a pro to throw out Web3 signer with the bathwater, as it were, to say this is a risk. I don't like the risk. We're going to mitigate the risk, and we're going to completely get rid of our signing infrastructure. No. In the future, if this works well on testnet and people get confident with it, I'd hope that other clients, Lighthouse, Prism, Nimbus, Teku, Groundin, Lodestar, etc., offer this consensus threshold option in their validator client.
That'd be very nice, yeah.
Yes, and that way, an operator could say, if I'm running Prism now, I continue to run Prism. I'm making 2 changes. One, I'm adding a whole bunch of additional backend servers with a variety of different clients on it, and 2, I'm configuring Prism for a threshold. If 40% of stake does this, then what happens in normal state? Nothing at all. Everybody is attesting. Everybody's just as well as it was before. What happens if, say, 3 or 4 clients have a correlated bug, like happened to us in Oleszki? 40% will stop attesting entirely, which means we did not finalize the wrong chain. We did not justify the wrong chain either. That's
which would be ideal for the whole network as well.
Which is ideal. Well, first, let's be selfish. I always like to appeal to people's own profit, right? Not their better nature. Yeah. Which means my stake is now not stranded. If we're finalizing the wrong chain, this is what happened on Oleszki, just to do a recap, because not everybody might remember this. We could not come back to the right chain without getting slashed and losing all ETH. There was a way to rescue Holeshki by turning off slashers, actually. We can't do that on mainnet. So on mainnet, what would happen is either you go back to the right chain and you get yourself slashed, or you stay on the wrong chain and get inactivity leaked down until the chain finalizes again. There go anywhere between 4 and 12 ETH per validator, maybe more, depending on how much stake had the wrong, the wrong consensus here. And then before you say, or anybody says, dude, that's never going to happen, Circle and Tether will just make the bug canonical. You're talking about Ethereum civil war. We do not want to get there. All of these outcomes are extremely bad.
It would require some kind of social consensus and
and we don't have the tech to do anything about it. Like if you're saying to all core devs, make this bug canonical, they've already said in the past, we're not going to do that. Some are saying, yeah, that would be the right thing. And then the other half is saying, absolutely freaking not, never. So that's what I'm saying, Ethereum civil war, right? Let's avoid that.
Yes,
so
please.
We already avoided it by getting off supermajority clients. Now we have a smaller probability of the same thing happening again, because now you need a correlated bug. Let's make that even smaller still. The reality is circuit breaker designs, nobody ever wants to run them, even in TradFi, until they're needed. And then the guys who didn't want to run them are the ones who are shouting the loudest why there's no circuit breaker. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm a naive person and think we can do better in Ethereum than TradFi.
For sure. I believe we can do better. And with many of these questions, it often boils down to like, what kind of risk are you willing to assume? And what's your risk management strategy?
Correct. We're not going to get it to zero, right? We're not going to get this risk to zero. We can't. But we can manage it. We can reduce it further than it is now. I was feeling very chill about it up until the Holeshki incident. Then I was thinking, okay, this isn't as unlikely. The probability is not as low to zero as I thought it was. It was caught in testnet, so everything worked the way it's supposed to. It didn't happen on mainnet. But there's a part of me now that says, this isn't as close to zero as I'd like it to be.
Yeah, I believe many people were shaken by the incident on Holeshki.
Some more than others, and a couple are like the sky is falling, and I think they calmed down a little when the Pectra update went through okay. Certainly the sky wasn't falling, but
awesome. I believe that's all we had to say about this topic as well, and that will conclude our episode for today. Thanks, Yorick. If you guys have any topics you'd like to discuss, we're very open to any suggestion, either through the comments on this video or through Discord or Reddit. If you want to reach us out, we're happy to take your input on like what we should be talking next. Hopefully, this can continue and we can have like a bunch of other topics to include here.
Absolutely. Thank you. Until next month.
Until next time, see you guys.